Well, what a privilege it is to be able to be here with you all. Particularly thank you to Susan and David for inviting me to speak today. I love coming to Warrnambool. I come often. I own a property here. I'm not sure why, but it's a great place to be. Let me also acknowledge traditional custodians of country, as Lisa has, and to pay respects to elders past and present. I also want to acknowledge Ida Ritchie, who's been a great friend over many years, and also Jamie Tate, who I was at university with, although I was noticeably a few years younger. Thank you, Jamie. It's a privilege to be here because it's a fantastic journey that David has been on, and I really give the credit to David rather than him giving the credit to me, to want the Jones family legacy to actually be back in Warrnambool, where Sir Fletcher Jones made such a massive impact. I'm always enthusiastic about speaking to people about the opportunities that philanthropy presents to any community. As David has indicated, I've been involved in philanthropy for over 30 years, both at a personal level and also as chair of the Sir Andrew Fairley Foundation. And through those roles, I've learned a lot about what can flow from a focus on geographical regions, such that the concentration of philanthropic impact truly can make system change. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because government money and not-for-profit agencies try hard, but they don't always succeed in actually changing the game. They're also palliative. It's also a privilege to speak at an event that's been enabled by such a great Australian in Sir Fletcher Jones, and celebrating the crucial role that he played in the economic and social development and fabric of Warrnambool during his lifetime. He not only enhanced the prosperity of this city and the thousands of people who worked for him in the factories and in the retail outlets, but he was clearly a man of infinite generosity and kindness. So he structured his business in building a cooperative, much like Sir Andrew Fairley did with SPC, so that the people didn't just work as employees, but they worked as owners. And that just creates a passion in those people, a real ownership sense that goes beyond anything that would be possible where they just are workers. And the contribution that David and Susan have made in thinking through how to create the legacy and the recognition for the family is incredibly important. My role really is to share some of my experiences, both as chair of the Fairley Foundation for nearly 30 years, and the power that can be driven by place-based funding models. Perhaps it's helpful if I just say a little bit about Shepparton. I'm like David, I was born there, but I don't live there. I'm third generation, and all of the team, we only have now 3 or 4 of a team of probably 20 family members that still live in the district. Sir Andrew lived there all his life. He was responsible for taking what was an insolvent cooperative of a fruit grower in 1921, which he was an investor, and my grandfather was an investor, and building it into the largest cannery in the Southern Hemisphere by the time of his death in 1965. He established SPC as a brand icon in Australia, and he fulfilled many civic and community roles, multiple times as mayor of Shepparton, and 20 years as commissioner of the SEC, as it then was. And in his will, he had no children, and he created in his will and gave his significant resources to create the Sir Andrew Fairley Foundation. But he said, I want you to spend this money within 20 miles of the Shepparton GPO. So in that sense, he had the wisdom and the vision to say, why would I not want to have my money spent where I want to benefit the community that enabled me to achieve my personal and financial success. So I want to really focus in today on place-based funding and the role that it can play in regional communities. And I want to speak about our work in Shepparton and how that's enabled additional foundations to now be created. I think probably Shepparton is now the epicentre of philanthropy in the whole of northern Victoria. And I also want to then talk a little bit about the Mornington Peninsula Foundation, which was founded in 2017. That's an area that operates where the incredibly wealthy and privileged have their homes, and they go there. This is just this most beautiful part of Melbourne. Everyone thinks, oh my gosh, this is just all the rich come here. But it has some of the most significant social challenges in a number of those local communities in the Hastings area, the Tyab, Rosebud West, Crib Point, Tootgarook. I mean, just really awful statistics. But in order to talk about both of those places, I thought it was useful to find from Lisa and David and Susan some initiatives that, or comparatives in Warrnambool, and to just put a context on some of the social significance that you've, the challenges that you have. And the fact that 30% of Warrnambool's households live on $50,000 a year, which is like 25% lower than the national figure. Housing affordability is a major issue, and social and emergency housing and for at-risk people is largely just unavailable. 24% of low-income households are under financial stress. Of all prep-age children in Warrnambool, only 62% are developmentally on track. So 1 in 3 of those kids is vulnerable. They're not unique to Warrnambool. I could bring statistics from Shepparton, from Traralgon, from Echuca, from Wodonga, and probably they're around the same sort of thing. It's a real major problem for regional cities throughout the state and probably throughout the nation. But it's why bringing local communities together to get philanthropy to focus in on those specific places will be much more impactful because it's focusing specifically on those matters. Shepparton's an extraordinarily diverse, multicultural community. It has the largest First Nations people, 6,000 Aboriginal people, mainly Yorta Yorta, live now in Shepparton, 4,000 Iraqi and Afghani refugees, new communities from Africa, from Syria, from the Pacific Islands. And a number of those people have come from detention centres, have experienced refugee camps, trauma, which puts a lot of pressure on the social infrastructure. The kids don't speak English, so not only are they going to school having to learn at their grade levels, but also to be able to learn the English language as well. It has historically been a place where many people from Europe came in the 40s and 50s, so it's always been a melting pot of immigration. Indeed, my family came there in the 1880s, so we're from immigrant background as well. There is significant underemployment. Anecdotally, it's got one of the highest percentages of communities living on welfare, and it has significant teenage pregnancies, which is an outcome of low school retention rates. As a foundation that's been funding there for almost 60 years, we've funded just about any organisation that asks for money. If you tell us what you want the money for, we'll write you a cheque. And about 15 years ago, we looked at our record of grants, and we acknowledged that very few of the initiatives that we had funded and had been involved with had truly changed Shepparton's social outcomes. And so I come to the word that David identified, which is we were just propping up the system or preventing it from becoming worse by what I call palliative funding. And it was also clear from our research that there was more than $5 million of philanthropic money going into Shepparton, and we didn't even know who those people were. That's not to mention the government money that's going in there to try and solve some of these social issues. So at that point we made, as a board, made a number of key decisions. The first was that we'd become a proactive funder. That is, we'd look, what were the greatest areas of need? Look for organisations that could deliver the projects and the programs that might address those, and if there weren't people doing it, we'd actually start it ourselves, and we've done that a few times. And we did it on the basis that Sir Andrew was an innovator, a successful businessman, somebody who really knew how to manage capital. He wouldn't be happy to know that we were just giving his money out to just prop the system up. The second step we took was to rethink what our vision was. He would have clearly wanted us to have an aspirational vision. He was an entrepreneur. I'm a great believer that any organisation has to have a very clear vision, a very clear light on the hill about what it is that you want to achieve. And so we resolved our vision. We talked to the local community. This was a bottom-up process. It wasn't top-down. We talked to a lot of people, and we said, our vision is now to drive momentous social and cultural change in Greater Shepparton. So it was absolutely clear to everybody we were fair dinkum about what we wanted to do in this city. We had robust aspirations. Then the third step that we took was to commit to some leadership outreach. So initially we hosted a Melbourne meeting with Philanthropy Australia involved, and the Myer Foundation assisted, and called on any community foundation or philanthropic organisation that was funding in Shepparton to come along to the meeting. And a few people turned up, and we found out about three foundations that we had never heard of that were funding in Shepparton, one of which was funding the same project that we were, but we didn't know it. From that moment on, we realised that there needed to be some leadership shown in place-based funding in Shepparton. So we decided the best possible way to do that was to hold a philanthropic summit. And that was done in 2011. We asked 30 foundations to come, 12 turned up. We got speakers there from business, from social enterprise, from service providers, from the council, and the whole purpose was to find out what were the real issues that needed to be addressed in Shepparton. The must-haves, not the nice-to-haves. How often did we get an application from somebody who put together a project so that they could get the money rather than put the project together so that they could get the outcomes? And we wanted to know, where do we really focus? At that summit, we did an economic snapshot of Shepparton. It was pretty dire. We did a social capital survey of the community. What was the bonding capital, the bridging capital, the institutional capital? And we presented all of those to the summit, and it wasn't a happy picture. We got a lot of criticism from people up in Shepparton saying, how dare you? How dare you come here? You don't even live here. How dare you come here and talk our city down? And I said, but these statistics are all public. You could go and get them. We got the researchers that did this just consulted public documents. The epiphany that a few people then had was, particularly in the business community, that there were in fact two Sheppartons. There was the top end of town, and then there was the other end. And the top end of town had no idea of the level of disadvantage and dysfunction at the other end. Within months of that summit, the Committee for Greater Shepparton was formed by the business community and by council, and it was a serious outreach and to commit to solving some of the challenges that their city faced, and it led to great outcomes already, and it's continuing to have powerful advocacy for Shepparton. Since then, we have had 4 more philanthropic summits, the last of which was in May 2024, and David and Susan were there. I think maybe they were seeing how to do it. And each of them has attracted different groups, and each of them has focused now on what are the issues today, what are the really burning things that are keeping people awake at night that we need to fix in this community to help, and how do we get to the institutions and the organisations that can actually deliver that. Some of the success of those summits clearly has been the formation of the Committee for Greater Shepparton, but also now we have 2 additional foundations that have come out of that. The first is the Greater Shepparton Foundation, a public benevolent institution, and it now completely focuses on ensuring that it can provide the benefits to people in necessitous circumstances. It took over a community foundation where the council funded $150,000 a year, and they raised through chook raffles and various other things about another $200,000. Not good. 40% council, 60% the community. The Greater Shepparton Foundation now raises over $1.5 million a year because it's a DGR1 as a public benevolent institution. Council still puts in the $150,000. They are absolutely delighted that they now have been able to leverage the money they put almost 10 times. The second foundation came out of our second philanthropic summit, and it's called the Greater Shepparton Lighthouse Project. It's really built on the need to stop the low rates of school retention, to enhance them dramatically, and it's every child in preschool, every child in primary school, every child making a successful transition to secondary school, and every child having a post-secondary education, whether it's at university or TAFE or an apprenticeship. Both are doing incredibly well, but they have all emerged because we were able to consistently focus the community's priorities on trying to ensure that there was no one left behind. I want to make some comments about the opportunities that place-based funding presents. And I think this is really relevant for what David's talked about and what the trustees of the Jones family are now going to be looking to achieve. There are so many elements of place-based funding that transcend what's possible if you're just a general philanthropic funder. Because I recall other foundations that I give advice to, and they'll spend millions of dollars, but it's out to various different organisations in different geographical locations, and it's very difficult to get acquittals that are meaningful, and it's very difficult to assess whether you've actually changed the game. Place-based funding enables you to understand the needs of your community much more comprehensively, particularly if you've got someone on the ground like Elisa. You know which organisations within your community and service providers are the ones that are really there to make change, and the ones that are there to achieve scale and revenue so they can report back to head office that they've achieved scale and revenue, but they're not so committed to the outcomes. Knowing what the community leaders, knowing which community leaders you align with, the movers and the shakers, knowing who they are and looking at their record, you want to get involved with them to be supporters of what you're doing. Being able to measure the outcomes, the long-term outcomes, so you can discern the impact that philanthropy really has. I mean, such a privilege to be able to see a community change because you know you've been able to use his money to make serial change to thousands of people's lives. And the last is to include local people who really know what's happening, either on a trustee board or to have an advisory board to ensure that at all times you've got relevance and connectedness in the decision making. David mentioned a little bit about our involvement with the Mornington Peninsula Foundation. That really came about as a result of I sit on a board of a high net worth family, and this man, Ian Hicks, just has a passion for the Mornington Peninsula. His family had had a long association with the Mornington Peninsula, and up to that time, the foundation established by his father, had literally been spraying money, millions of dollars every year, into medical research, a bit of this, a bit of that, a few arts things, never really followed up and achieving nothing, and he was frustrated. And so we got together and said, let's look at the model of place-based funding. So we started slowly. We identified the most successful method of overcoming intergenerational poverty, which is what is in some of these places down on the Mornington Peninsula, is to take a long-term view of advancing educational outcomes, both at a preschool and a primary school level. It was a very measured beginning, it needed to be, but we supported that with independent research which identified those specific geographical areas on the peninsula that were in the greatest need of support. We needed to ensure that we built our brand and our outcomes bottom up. So you never want to go into this top down. It's essential when coming into a new area that you've got social license to operate from the community, and that was achieved through really patient conversations and positive interactions, seeking that community input. There was already a community foundation operating in the Mornington Peninsula, the 59 Foundation. It was a DGR2. It recognised, the trustees, the board said, there's no point in us being here, we'll merge into the Mornington Peninsula Foundation. 7 years on from there, 2024, our work has been principally with the primary schools and then into the primary school feeders into the secondary schools, and it's been transformational. Let me give you an example of Rosebud Secondary. 10 years ago, it was a school that was mired in a pool of darkness and decay. It had a terrible reputation, suffered from tragic events which had impacted that community. There were 6 principals in less than 10 years. It had poor teacher retention, difficult classroom behaviours, and many students just either were not attending or left school at 14 or 15. In 2017, Lisa Holt took on the role as principal. And we, at that point, had started working with the primary feeder schools on literacy, numeracy. And we also started to get involved with La Trobe University in the science of learning. It's transformed both the feeder primary schools and Rosebud Secondary. And I'll just give you this amazing, amazing event that took place 2 weeks ago. Every year, the Department of Education has their state teacher awards. In 2024, Lisa Holt was named the Principal of the Year for the entire state of Victoria, and her lead literacy teacher was named as the Teacher of the Year by the Education Department. It's never happened before that the same school won both awards. It was so unbelievable that none of us could sort of take it in. It was so special. We're just seeing major data shifts in schools that we're working with as the end of year results come in. When we started this work, 70% of the children enrolling in year 7 were not at the expected levels of reading. More than half were at year 2 levels. In the year 6 cohort of one of our primary schools now, 75% of the kids are now at or above the expected levels. In the year 7 cohort, we've seen a 40% drop in children at risk of permanent illiteracy. So it's lifting all boats, but it's so special that by virtue of our concentration and money and significant amounts of money that we've been able to raise because people on the Mornington Peninsula are passionate about the success of their area and they want to see it succeed. I mean, we started in our first year, we raised $500,000. This year, we will raise $4.5 million, zero government money, all philanthropic money from committed people on the peninsula who want this area to succeed beyond its capabilities and to wipe out the intergenerational poverty that exists. I guess it's an example of how small organisations committed to change can inspire and achieve system change, and we are doing that. Let me conclude. We're so fortunate that Uncle Sir Andrew, had the wisdom to make the precatory wish in his will that his money be spent in the community. We're doubly blessed because Susan and David have now made that commitment to be place-based funders in Warrnambool and to lift the boats that are all boats here. That enables us all to develop a knowledge and expertise in relation to place-based funding that simply would not be possible without the encouragement of past practice and what's going to happen in the future. If successful place-based funding sounds easy from my remarks, let me assure you it's not all plain sailing. Politics are alive and well in regional communities, as are disparate views on what action is needed to solve the problem. But the advantage that philanthropy has is that it's not invested in the politics. It's invested in the outcome. It has no conflicts. It can chart a course that is truly in the best interests of the community, and it's putting its money up to back that judgment. But the one caveat that I lodge in relation to place-based funding is that it's essential that you carry your community with you in any projects that are implemented. It won't work when you come into a community and tell them what the problem is and give them the solutions that you think are appropriate. It's all got to be bottom up. It can't ever work if it's top down. The initiative of the Jones family to adopt this place-based funding model is visionary, and I congratulate David and Susan and all of the trustees that have taken it and the family that have taken this decision in doing so, and I hope that it's, like you, it's just a great success. Thanks very much for having me.